Howdy folks, and welcome to the Andersonville Smithy. Boy, do we have an incredible show for you today. We're going to have one of our master blacksmiths, or our only master blacksmith, Mr. J. Reakirt, do a very interesting project for you. Mr. Reakirt, what are you going to be doing for us today?
We're going to start out by making a household J-hook with a twist in it and a curlicue on the end, a decorative item that you can hang anything that you want on.
And after Mr. Reakirt does all the hard labor of the show, I'm going to tell you about some of the hardy tools that fit in the back of the anvil. The hardy tools, of course, being a very important part of any blacksmith shop. So folks, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show here at the Andersonville Smithy.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do today is to make a household hook, and this is the material that we are going to use. The first thing that we do is we're going to place this in the fire. We're going to throw air to the fire so that we can bring our heat up to about 5,000 degrees. It'll take just a few seconds to bring this up to working temperature, which will be approximately 1,800 degrees when we come out of the fire. We have a rotating valve in the bottom, which will clean out the bottom of the fire so we can maintain it all day long. It's about ready to come out now. That makes the oval for the top of the fire hook, and we'll put it back in the fire. At this time, we're going to punch the hole in that oval that we just made. My assistant will hold for me, and we will do this with a punch. Remember, in the old days, they didn't have the modern tools that we have today, and the only way to make a hole was to punch it. Flip it. Take the small plug out of it. Position it, sir. Tool back in this holder. Thank you. And that then completes the hole. This is the hole that the nail goes through to attach it to the wall. The next thing we're going to do, since this is too long for a regular hook, is cut it off. Now, in the old days, they again did not have the modern equipment of every type and description like we have. So, what we're going to do is to put this in the fire, take a heat, and get ready to cut this off. So I'm taking the heat there. These are hardy tools that have the square shank. There are a zillion of them. They fit into the hardy hole. That's the square hole in the back of the anvil. And they go either way. Here's the idea. Heavy anvil won't go any place. Small, portable, interchangeable tool. It drops into place and you're ready to do serious work. As soon as this comes back up to working temperature, we'll do the cutoff. While that's working there, I'm going to shake the fire down. This is a rotating valve in the bottom of the fire that allows us to clean it out on any time that we feel that the fire needs adjusting. Here we go. Hot metal goes on the ground for safety reasons. We now reach over and pick up the part that we're going to use to make the hook. Now we've got to have some other way other than holding by hand, so this is where we put the tongs on. Enter the tongs. No more than a pair of pliers with specially formed jaws to grab a hold of the metal like so. We then come back and put the locking rings on. This is the original vice grip. Allows us to hold it in one hand on the left while your right hand is free. The hot hardy or the cutting tool goes back in the slot, and this goes back in the fire, and we start drawing it out. We already have a fair amount of heat on there from the cut that we made, so it won't take quite as long to heat this up as we had before. And I've got a good, hot, strong fire, and it's about ready to come out right now. Here we go to the anvil, and we start drawing it out to a taper. We've drawn that out to a taper, and the next thing we're going to do is make the actual hook end. Will not require as much heat as we had before. And here we'll do the ring. The next step will be finishing the hook, and we'll be back very shortly to finish it up.
Hello everybody. Well, today on Tool Time we're going to talk about a very important part of the anvil, which you just saw, which is the square hole in the back end of the anvil that's called the hardy hole. The hardy hole is used for a myriad of purposes, and also the round hole that's right beside it, which is known as the Pritchell hole, is also used for a myriad of different purposes. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk right over here, and I'm going to show you some of those tools that we have and that we use. The first of the tools that we have are pretty much very basic. Now, one thing that you've seen on the show a lot is the cutting hardy, which is nothing more than a shank with a blade on top of it used for shearing the metal. However, there are a multitude of different types of tools that are used for different purposes, very specific purposes. For example, this is one that you may have seen. This is known as our bending hardy, and this is one of Mr. Reakirt's personal models, and it's made for bending at least 3 different types of metal. Here we have the initial part, have smaller ones on the side, and this piece here is actually made for bending tent stakes. So once again, you see this very specific function in this tool. Now, a couple of the others we want to browse around are, for example, is this. This is known as a dishing piece. This piece fits down in the hardy hole just like anything else, but it has a concave surface here. This is when you take sheets of metal, press it on top, and hammer it to the form. This makes a nice, smooth dish. Let's say that you're working on the anvil and the horn is too big, or you don't have enough thin spots between the heel of the anvil to get a piece of work onto. That's when you can use a anvil, a different size anvil that actually goes in the anvil that you have. For example, this is a small anvil that is made out of a railroad tie that has a hardy shank on it. So you can set this piece down into the hardy hole, and you have a much thinner horn and a much thinner heel to do your work. Several of the other types of hardies that we use are for dishing and also for making things round or using forms such as this, which is basically a large ball bearing with the shank. And then we get into things that are a little more exotic. Now, this looks just like a regular piece of steel with a nub on the end of it, but this is actually for putting the metal heel plates on reenactors' boots. Of course, in the Civil War, most of the shoes they had and the boots they had were simply leather soled. They would wear out very quickly, and the tailors, or the cobblers and the blacksmiths would actually have to go in and put these plates on. And this actually allows you to put the shoe over it and have a solid surface to nail into. The other really neat tool, and this is actually for the Pritchell hole, which is the smaller round hole, is this pair of snips. Now, of course, you can sit here and use your hand to work most of the snips, but if you place this down into the Pritchell hole, providing a firm base, and add your sheet metal, and by and start tapping this, you can actually cut much heavier gauge sheet metal than you'd be able to do by hand. Speaking of the Pritchell hole is also very important in another function, it's punching. Now you may have seen it in some of our demos. The punch, the main one we've used has been this one, which is a hand punch. It's simply a rounded surface that you put onto the metal and hammer down. Now, if there was no hole in the anvil, once this bottomed out, you would, one, mess up the surface of your anvil, and two, probably mess up the surface of your punch. But by having that hole poked through the anvil, you can actually punch a plug out the other side, making everything nice and neat and not damaging your tools. The hand tools that come into this, and this is the second part of what I want to get into, is that so much work is done on the surface of the anvil. You have your Hardy tools, you have your Pritchell tools, and then right down the way you start using those hand tools like your punch. One of the other tools that we use very much here in the shop is a hand chisel. Now this is just a plain cold chisel that we've somewhat modified with the hammer, and this is used to strike the steel and split it. Now I just told you with the punch that if you were to bottom out with the punch, you would damage the punch and the surface of your anvil. So what we have to solve that is something that's known as a cutting plate. Now this is a very thick piece of steel that has a shank for the Hardy welded to it. This fits down into the top of the anvil, and this protects the top of the anvil from any sort of chisel or punch mark that might affect it. If you can see there are several very large chisel marks on the surface of this plate. Now this plate is actually softer than the surface of our anvil, so there's no damage to the end of the chisel. There are several varieties and modifications of these tools. Through blacksmithing history, there have been so many different changes to just about every concept of tool that you wouldn't have anywhere to begin or end. A chisel can have a series of modifications, and for that matter, a punch can too. But the Hardy hole has another function, and it's used in making nail and rivets. This strange looking tool here is actually a Hardy tool. You can see the small nub shank here that fits into the back end of the anvil. If you look very closely, you can see a squared hole here. What happens is you take your bar, you drive a piece through here, and then mushroom it over. This then comes out of the Hardy hole and tapped, and your nail falls out. This part is where you understand that the anvil is more than just something to beat on. It is an intricate tool that's used by every blacksmith in every shape, form possible. The Hardy tools, the hand tools, everything works together to make a functioning blacksmith shop. And that's the tale of the Hardy hole.
This is where we left off, folks, and the first thing I'm going to do is put a curlicue on the front of it. I've heated it up to the proper temperature. We put the pliers on it and bring it around like so. We now have that nice curlicue on the front of it. The next thing we're going to do is put a twist in the center, because this is a decorative hook. Reposition the tongs, put the rings back on, put it in the fire, and go about the business of letting it soak up that heat. Now for this operation here, we are going to do this twist over here on this post vise, which was actually designed in Roman times. That particular one was made in the 1840s and is still serviceable to this day. The heat is coming up very nicely. It will take just a few more seconds to have this ready to roll. There we go. I'm bringing it out, going over to the vise. Going to chuck it up like so, and we're going to use our twisting tool. Looks a little bit like Donald Duck. And we'll give it one full revolution. Pull it, back over to the anvil where we will do a little straightening work. Check it. Make sure it's square with the world. One more. That's good. Now we'll take it over to the slack tub, which is a big bucket of water, and we will now cool it. In pulling it out, we always make sure, tap it with the back of our hands to make sure that it is cool. Drop the rings, put the tongs back in their place, and get ready to wipe it down and take the excess water off. And from here, it would then go to the finishing room where it would receive the finishing coat, which is linseed oil. Now, you've seen this made here from scratch. It's the way it was done today. It's the same way it would have been done 100 years ago. And for that matter of fact, it's the same way it would have been done 2,000 years ago. Keep in mind that the anvil is a working tool, has the two holes which you saw demonstrated, the round hole, which is called the Pritchell hole, and the square hole, which is called the Hardy hole. The whole idea behind the Pritchell hole is that the punch is able to go through without hitting the top of the anvil, damaging either the anvil or the punch. The Hardy hole is common to all of these tools. They have the square shank. They drop in, the idea being a heavy anvil, not going anyplace, small, portable, interchangeable tool that you drop in, you're ready to do serious work. All tools go back in their bench after use, and we are ready now to well, let's talk about the fire for a second. The fire is fueled by coal. We get ours from Alabama, and we're able to reach temperatures of approximately 5,000 degrees. The core right now is at about 3,500. If I throw air to it from the blower system over here, it immediately brings it up to the 5,000 degrees. Now, once it is at that temperature, then it is a very simple matter to put your iron in, and in a very short period of time, as you have seen, then the heat comes up, and when it comes back, it drops back down to that lower temperature. We have underneath here a rotating valve which cleans the bottom of the fire out, which means that you can maintain the same fire all day. It also has an ash dump which goes like that so that we can clean the bottom of the fireplace out. This then puts us into the position where we can continue to work with our next project and go immediately to the same fire that we've been having all along. The post vise, as I mentioned very briefly earlier, was designed in Roman times. This particular one was made in the 1840s and is still serviceable today. The anvil, likewise, was made in the year 1836. It's a William Foster and weighs 163 pounds. And if any of my grandchildren or great-grandchildren decide to pick this craft up, they would be able to use this equipment with reasonable care for an indefinite number of years, if not centuries.
You've seen us work, and you've seen the work that we've made. If you're interested in contacting the Andersonville Smithy, write to us at the Andersonville Smithy, P.O. Box 177, Andersonville, Georgia 31711. Or you can give us a call, the Andersonville Smithy, at area code 229-924-1022. We look forward to hearing from you very soon. Well, that was so good, I'm almost sorry to see it go. Mr. Reakirt, that was a fantastic demonstration. I want to thank you personally. That was absolutely incredible.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Well, you got to learn a little bit about the interior hardware of a J-hooks. You got to hear about the Hardys in the back of the anvil. What more could you ask for from any blacksmith show? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us, and we hope that you'll be here with us next time here on the Andersonville Smithy.